What's poppin', y'all? Welcome to episode 16 of my series on the 48 Laws of Power, where we connect the story from each chapter to an event that happened with a music artist or in the music business. And today we're going to be talking about how Birdman saved Lil Wayne's commercial career, and he did it by not letting him release any music. This may seem insane at first. He was holding Wayne back from what we heard and saw, and although it was likely unintentional, Birdman did help him. So stick around until the end to find out exactly how. If you like analysis videos on hip hop and the music business, then subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell right now. Otherwise, my videos will not show up in your subscription box. That's not enough, so hit the notification bell. Law 16 reads, use absence to increase respect and honor. Too much circulation makes the price go down. The more you are seen and heard from, the more common you appear. If you are already established in a group, temporary withdrawal from it will make you more talked about, even more admired. You must learn when to leave. Create value through scarcity. There's two separate stories told in this chapter, one of which is too potent for me to share on YouTube. But if you do want to read it, or better yet, listen to it for free, there will be a link in the description to a free trial of Audible where you can get this entire book for free. The story we're going to use is one that takes place in what is now known as Iran. The Medes had revolted and broken away from the Assyrian Empire, but now they had to set up a new government. They didn't want to end up in the same situation where one person had all the power, so they deliberated. But during this time, since there was no leader, the country was in shambles. There were different factions and villages fighting amongst each other, which was worse than when they were ruled over. But in one of these villages was a man named Diocese, who built a reputation on him being a fair man and settling arguments between two parties amicably. He was so good at this that any legal conflicts that happened in his area were brought directly to him, and he began to grow in power. One reason for this was because throughout the different villages, the law was taken much less serious. Judges were very corrupt, so the people didn't trust their case to go to court anymore, and would rather handle things themselves, which usually meant violence. So when news was beginning to spread through word of mouth that there was a man who was wise, incorruptible, and unbiased, all the Median villages began to turn to him to settle their cases, and he became the one to hand out justice to the land. But at his peak, when he had the most power, Diocese just had enough. He was no longer going to listen to any more suits, settle any more problems between brothers or villages, and he complained that he was spending so much of his time dealing with other people's problems that he neglected his own life. He retired, just like Michael Jordan at his peak. Now, once he stopped, things went back to the way they were and crime increased. The country was in shambles, and the people had no reason to trust the corrupt lawmakers since he was gone. The high-ranking members of each village of Media had a meeting to talk about how they were going to fix this problem. One of the leaders said, "We cannot continue to live in this country under these conditions. Let us appoint one of our number to rule so that we can live under orderly government, rather than losing our homes altogether in the present chaos." So, even after all they suffered under the Assyrians, they decided it was a good idea to set up a monarchy and crown a king. And of course, who better to be their king than a man of the people that everybody wanted, Diocese. It wasn't easy convincing him though. He didn't want to have to deal with the village's constant problems anymore, but they begged him. Without him, it was anarchy, and the country was getting torn apart. He agreed if they were going to meet his conditions, which were as follows. He wanted a massive palace built just for him. He wanted bodyguards, a capital city that was going to be built from which he could rule, and in the center of the capital, he wanted his palace surrounded by walls and impossible to access by regular people. They granted him all of this, and he stated that these were going to be the terms of his ruling. He forbid anybody admission to his presence, and the only way to communicate a message to him was through a messenger. Nobody in the royal court could see him more than once a week, and they had to ask for permission beforehand. Diocese ended up ruling for 53 years, expanded the Median Empire, which paved the way for what was going to become the Persian Empire under his great-great-grandson Cyrus. And during his rule, the people's respect for him continued to grow until it became a sort of worship. They didn't see him as human anymore, and they began to believe he was the son of a god sent to rule over them. Diocese was an ambitious man, and at a young age knew that in a land of anarchy, the most powerful man is the one who can be trusted to be a fair judge. So that's the reputation he built for himself. But he learned the power of this law when he had too many clients, was too available, too noticeable, and didn't have the degree of respect he once had, although he was at the peak of his power. People began taking him for granted, so he retired for a while to allow the people to see what life was like without his judgment. And they ended up begging for him to return, and he did the same thing when he was made king. The historian Herodotus wrote that there was a risk that if they saw him habitually, it might lead to jealousy and resentment, and plots would follow. But if nobody saw him, the legend would grow that he was a being of a different order from mere men. How does this connect to Birdman and Lil Wayne? At one point, Lil Wayne was putting out more music than any other popular rapper, and it's how he built his reputation of the greatest rapper alive in the 2000s. He was releasing full-length mixtapes for free that were better than some rappers' fully produced albums, and delivering great albums as well. People began to see him as the premier rapper. If he was beating all of these other rappers in quality and quantity, it meant he was undoubtedly the best. But in the early years of this decade, people had begun talking about Lil Wayne falling off. He had become too accessible to everyone. He had fed them a little bit too much. And just like Diocese, people began taking his music for granted. And after the terrible album that was I Am Not a Human Being 2, performing awfully, both commercially, selling only 217K first week, which was bad for Wayne in 2013, and from the fans and critics thinking it was terrible, more talk was going around that Wayne was finished. This is when the Carter 5 started to get teased, and was slated to release at the end of 2014, which didn't happen. On December 4th, 2014, Lil Wayne tweeted, "To all my fans, I want you to know that my album won't and hasn't been released because Baby and Cash Money Records refused to release it." This was the beginning of a big feud and lawsuit between the father and son. People in Wayne's camp would continuously say that the Carter 5 was coming out soon, but it wasn't happening. And in 2015, Lil Wayne announced his $51 million lawsuit against Cash Money, saying that Birdman owes him money and violated terms of their contract by holding back the release of the Carter 5, and they were no longer speaking to each other. Lil Wayne would be yelling out F Cash Money on different shows, and in April of 2015, his tour bus got shot up in Atlanta by an associate of Young Thug, who at the time was also insulting Lil Wayne and trying to beef with him. But Wayne barely gave him a response. Wayne would diss Cash Money on his verse of A$AP Rocky's M's on his At Long Last A$AP album, and in June of 2015, he signed a streaming deal with Tidal to release his Free Weezy album, which shouldn't even count because this album was taken down. It wasn't available on other streaming platforms, and it wasn't the Carter 5. This process of insulting Cash Money continues for the next couple of years, with the hype for the Carter 5 reaching so high that some people thought it would never release. Me being one of those people, as I made a video back in 2017 with the title 5 Rap Albums or Mixtapes That'll Never Release. Similar to Diocese, the Carter 5 became a sort of myth. It wasn't going to release, and this made people want it even more, adding to the fact it had been years since Lil Wayne had dropped an actual album. They missed Wayne and were hungry for more music from him. In September of 2016, Lil Wayne would get on Twitter and drop a tweet that had everyone thinking he retired, similar to how Diocese had left his post. "I am now defenseless and mentally defeated, and I leave gracefully and thankful. I love my fans, but I'm done." And this triggered everyone into showing an overwhelming amount of support for Wayne. Damn near every single rapper you could think of sent support publicly, encouraging him not to quit, and the fans began to reminisce over all the great music that he had released over the years. Now that Lil Wayne had actually announced he may retire, they didn't want it to happen, when they had just recently been making jokes about him falling off. But thankfully, later on he would tweet, "I'm good, y'all, don't trip." That same month, it was reported that Lil Wayne had the actual recording of the Carter 5, but didn't want to hand it over to Cash Money because he wanted leverage in the legal battle against Birdman. And this rumor would get validated in the summer of 2017, where Lil Wayne says he has the power to release the Carter 5 whenever he wants. He says, and I quote, "Of course, you're going to see the Carter 5. I just don't want to put it out the wrong way. Honestly, I can do what I want at any time. The fans deserve it to be right, and that's how it's going to be. I'm going to make sure it's right. I can drop whatever I want to drop. That's why I keep dropping whatever I want to drop. But I'm not going to give them the Carter 5 the wrong way." And dropping is likely referencing the two mixtapes, Sorry for the Wait 2 and No Ceilings 2, that he released back in 2015 along the Free Weezy album. But it had been 2 years without any music from Wayne. The people were hungry. In the beginning of 2018, Birdman says that the Carter 5 will be released before the end of the year, and in June 7th of 2018, Birdman and Wayne reach a settlement in which Lil Wayne gets paid $10 million. That summer, Birdman and Wayne reconcile after he apologizes, and with a Billboard article he said the Carter 5 was dropping really soon. And in a video he released on YouTube, Lil Wayne announced the Carter 5 will be released on his birthday, September 28th, only 3 days later. It would go on to sell 480,000 first week, with the second largest streaming week and his fourth #1 album. The single Uproar with Swizz Beatz would peak at number 7 on the Hot 100, and the last song to chart this high or above, with Lil Wayne as the lead artist, was How to Love and She Will, both at number 5 and number 3 respectively back in 2011 when he released the Carter 4. Commercially, it was a huge success, and most critics considered it the best album since the Carter 3, and it was on the year-end top 50 best albums list of 2018 for every major online publication. One thing we learned from this is that Birdman might have not been lying for most of what he was accused of. He got a lot of hate when he said Lil Wayne can release the Carter 5 whenever he wants, but Lil Wayne would later admit that he was able to release it whenever he wanted. And when Baby said it was going to release before the end of 2018, he was right about that too. Likely unintentional, but Baby and Lil Wayne both used this law, most likely intentional by Lil Wayne because he said he wanted the release for this to be right, and after he had finished his lawsuit, with the publicity higher than ever, doing a huge cover article afterwards on Billboard and announcing it would be released on his birthday, it was a calculated storm of publicity that just the name The Carter on any album brings. Even the biggest haters of Lil Wayne had missed him so much, even if they try to pretend they didn't, because they all streamed the project anyway. And if Lil Wayne had fallen off to them in 2011, there would be no need to check him out in 2018, but they did anyway. And the years that Lil Wayne was away from releasing an album had people just salivating at the mouth for this release from him, and it got the reception that it deserved. If Lil Wayne had just kept releasing every year like he used to, he might not have had such a big selling week and might have tired the listeners out. He was giving them too much at one point that they became ungrateful. But when he pulled back and allowed them to hear the rap game without him, they realized what they took for granted. The reversal to this law is as follows. This law only applies once a certain level of power has been attained. The need to withdraw only comes after you have established your presence. Leave too early and you do not increase your respect. You are simply forgotten. When you are first entering onto the world stage, create an image that is recognizable, reproducible, and is seen everywhere. Until that status is attained, absence is dangerous. Instead of fanning the flames, it will extinguish them. Remember, in the beginning, make yourself not scarce, but omnipresent. Only what is seen, appreciated, and loved will be missed in its absence. Leaving too early is a mistake that Ugly God made far too soon. He was just getting established in the rap game, but he up and ghosted for 2 years with just one feature on Lil Yachty's album, and the hype for him died so much because of that. He failed to create the image that was recognizable, reproducible, and seen everywhere for a long period of time. As a matter of fact, many other artists that came after him copied everything that he was doing and they got a lot of publicity and grew a fan base doing it while he was gone. He only had that for a couple of months with his song Water, and in this fast-paced time, others like Lil Pump were ready to just hop on the wave, and they weren't going to slow down anytime soon. It seemed at certain times that Ugly God was a bit unsure and didn't even know if he wanted the fame or how he was going to be perceived. He didn't want to fully embrace being a meme, and he didn't know if he wanted to become an actual serious rapper and abandon the comedic part of what made his fans so attracted to him. So he fled the music scene, and for the betterment of his own well-being, which always precedes any monetary or fame-related goal. And when he came back, there wasn't an overwhelming amount of support. If another rapper who was omnipresent like 6ix9ine had disappeared and came back. This law cannot be used until you really establish yourself. People need to be seeing you everywhere, so much that they begin to think that they're tired of you or fed up, but not exactly reaching that point. And then you disappear, and they start to wonder what happened. Where'd this person go? And their appreciation begins to grow and grow. This is what's happened with 6ix9ine. He was everywhere. Easily the most talked about rapper in the game, if not the most talked about music artist in general. And ever since he's been in jail, people are starting to miss how entertaining he consistently made the rap game with his personality and his music. So now, when he's released, there will be a huge stream of support for him, and many that were haters will still check out his stuff, even if they have something negative to say about it. If you enjoyed this video, then click on the box on the top right. It's a link to a playlist for the rest of the series. I'll see you there.